Greetings, programs. This is Wretch, and welcome back to Vampire the Masquerade Parliament of Knives. Now, in the last stream, guys, in Chapter 7, we had a pretty big bombshell dropped right on Silas's head, and that was that Corlys was not actually the Nosferatu sire. We got, basically, it was almost like a sleeper memory activated in Silas's mind that showed Arundel busting in as Corlys was diablerizing Silas's original sire. And needless to say, it's something that he's processing. And we decided to join the Anarchs to kind of go against the Camarilla, or at least Corlys and the status quo. Right now, I figure if Silas is anything, he's very confused. But Ward was going to carry out his plan by attacking Elysium, while a good portion of the kindred in the Camarilla were actually attacking the Tremere Chantry, or the Tremere base in the sewers. And we decided not to do that, and we got knocked out. And apparently, according to what I've been hearing in the comments, a lot of people haven't gone down this path before. Had we decided to attack Elysium or go after the Tremere, it would have doubled the length of the chapter. But you know, what's done is done, and the important thing is that Silas gets through this with his head still attached to his body, or at least it's a good portion of blood still within his body, with the head still attached. But now we enter to Chapter 8, Scrutiny. Your eyes flutter open as your body is racked with hunger, clawing at your veins with 1,000 sharp-nailed fingertips. A water-damaged ceiling comes into focus, mold creeping from the corner directly above you into the center of the room. It takes another minute to be able to feel your fingers, and almost as much time for you to circulate what remains of your turgid blood through your limbs. You rise slowly, groaning with the effort as you stabilize yourself by grabbing the edge of a metal table, nearly knocking over a large assortment of craftsman's tools. The room is dimly lit by a single bulb dangling precipitously, I have heard that word before, from a wire and delicately rigged from the plaster above. What happened to me, you think? Where's Jordan? And for that matter, where am I? And how hungry are we? We are ravenous. Not good. Movement behind the table startles you, but you're relieved to see that it's only Jordan, coming to in much the same way as you just did. Silas? She calls out. Are you there? I'm over here, you say, grabbing the table and pulling it away so Jordan can get to her feet. But I don't know where we are. Go ahead and lower that light just a little bit. It smells, Jordan says, like rot. You hadn't noticed. You've been too preoccupied with the hunger in your belly and a lingering anger at the Anarchs who put you here. Had Ward and his goons actually gone ahead and attacked Elysium? You have a bad feeling that you'll find out soon. A single door leads out of the room. Long ago it had been painted white, but now it's a greasy gray, flaking chips onto the floor as age turns it brittle. You put your ear up to the wood and listen closely for any indications of life. Nothing. Dead silence. We need to do something, Jordan says. Warn them somehow. Well, we don't even know where we are. We need to focus on getting ourselves to safety first. I agree with you there, Jordan says. Focus on one thing at a time. The more I think about it, the more I worry it may be too late. Feeling in my gut tells me we just slept through the day. She eyes the door beside you. Is anyone out there? I think we're alone, you say, slowly pushing the door open to reveal an old mechanic's garage. It seems abandoned, but you can see streetlights through the open garage door, so at least the Anarchs didn't drop you in the middle of nowhere. There's a scent in the air, elevated and amplified over the smell of oil and gasoline fumes by your gnawing hunger. I smell blood. A few minutes' search confirms your suspicions. There are at least 5 dead bodies scattered throughout the abandoned garage, each wearing the same all-black ensemble. Most of them have weapons either on or near their corpses, each one smashed and abandoned by whoever killed them. At first glance, you think they must have been a military group of some kind, but a closer examination reveals inconsistencies. The clothing isn't uniform at all. Each one is slightly different, like they put on their darkest clothes before stepping out for the evening. "This must have been the Anarchs' work," Jordan says. "But why? Were they attacked? And why leave us here with them?"
Well, Ward told me he was sorry right before I blacked out. Maybe he convinced Sevik that dumping us here would leave them enough time to do their thing before we could sound the alarm.
Jordan grits her teeth. A guy like Ward, it's almost as bad for him to like you as want you dead.
True, but if he wanted us gone, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Can't argue with that, Jordan says. So who are these guys? Amateur vampire hunters?
Government agents probably wouldn't have been slaughtered like this. These guys didn't know what they were getting into. Might have gotten a whiff of us, and instead of going to the authorities, they thought they could be hunters.
Doesn't seem to have worked out for them, Jordan says. Hard to feel sympathy for someone who would shoot me if they knew what I was. Jordan turns her back on the bodies and walks out to the road, checking for the street name. You follow, desiring little more than to be away from here and find a good place to feed. A rusted sign swings in the cold winter breeze declaring the abandoned mechanic shop Spritzers of Ottawa. I have a burner on me, Jordan says. Surprised the Anarchs never took it. You want me to call Gerard and get us a ride out of here?
You nod. That's better than walking. Thanks, Jordan.
You'll need to be very careful who you tell about this, Gerard counsels as you and Jordan stare out the windows, lights flickering by as the ghoul drives you back into the city proper. It had taken him about half an hour to find you, which was pleasantly surprising even given his encyclopedic knowledge of the city's streets and surrounding landmarks. The attack is all over the news and the sheriff has requested your presence, although I'm sure a delayed appearance might not be overly suspicious, all things considered. It would be better for you to show up fed than to appear as you are now. It's hard to argue with Gerard, not that you're in the mood to reprimand your retainer for stepping over the line from servant to advisor. Besides, he's right on all counts, and he brought you a fresh set of clothes to replace the ones ruined by gangrel claws and bloodstains. With your permission, I'll drop Miss Tremblay off at her haven first. You should show up for the investigation in a staggered fashion and from different directions, and she'll probably want to get changed. I'm okay with that, Jordan mutters. She looks exhausted despite just waking up. I didn't get a nice new set of clothes like Silas here. Apologies, Gerard says. There was nothing in your size. I'm just kidding, Gerard, Jordan says. Sometimes you have to laugh at the situation. Thank you for picking us up. After dropping Jordan off safely back at her haven, Gerard suggests that you spend a moment to hunt before meeting up with Key at Elysium. It's a suggestion you can hardly say no to. Where do you plan to sate your cravings? The Greyhound station's going to have security cameras. I just don't want to go there. But let's go ahead and try it. We haven't gone to it yet. See what trouble we get into. You approach the bus station cautiously, wary of the brighter street lights and passersby. Not long ago, the station was voted one of the least attractive buildings in Ottawa, and it's easy to understand why. It looks like it was built in the early 70s and hasn't seen much in the way of sprucing up since then. Rumor has it that the service will be shutting down soon, but even though volumes are low, it's still up and running. For now, at least. 3 wary-looking midnight travelers loiter about outside the terminal, waiting for the next bus out of the city and on to Toronto or Montreal. Or maybe, Oshawa if they're unlucky. You don't want to leave too many mortals able to identify you if something goes wrong, so the fewer who see you skulking around, the better. Deciding that 3 is an acceptable number, you slowly work your way closer, watching for opportunities. The 2 young women seem to be together, reading something on their phones as they huddle close to ward off the cold. The remaining man stands apart, hands thrust deep in the pockets of his heavy winter coat as he stares blankly into the distance. It's quiet and out. You're not exactly in the city center, and long-distance travel by bus hasn't been the most popular mode of transportation of late. It's not the best pickings you've ever seen, but you think you can make it work. Ooh. Shiv, thank you for that, host. I like this one. I pretend to be a vagrant and shuffle uncomfortably close to the 2 women, asking to bum a smoke. If they grow uneasy enough to head inside, that'll leave me alone with the man in a heavy winter coat. You stumble toward the station, taking hesitant steps that you hope will be mistaken for a drunk or an addict in search of his next fix. The man watches you with idle interest, but he doesn't seem inclined to talk, and that suits your purposes fine. The young women never even look up from their glowing screens on their phones as you pass by. Well, you know one way to snap them out of it and bring them back to the real world.
Hey,
you rasp. Your face is cloaked in the hood of your coat, so the women can't quite make out your features.
Either of you lovely ladies got a smoke?
One of them looks up at you, disgust smeared over her face without any attempt at subtlety. The other woman stabs the screen of her phone with her index finger and then joins her friend. You take a step closer and they both take 2 steps back. Well, that's what you were going for, wasn't it? We don't smoke, the disgusted-looking woman says. Yeah, her friend adds. We vape. And nobody said bum a smoke for at least 30 years, or for the last 30 years. You're somewhat surprised to hear that, actually. Then again, you were embraced over half a century ago, and time does have a way of getting away from you. By the way, that is a lie. I still hear people around here say bum a smoke, so. They seem repulsed by my presence, but not quite enough. It'll take more than words. I cough loudly and wipe my nose with the back of my hand. You lower your head and force a spasm through your body, mimicking several mortal-like coughs as best you can. When you're finished, you wipe your nose with the back of your hand. Fortunately, you're not leaking any actual fluids. A shot of alarm shows in their eyes. There we are. What was it that they used to call it when you were younger? Stranger danger? Now they're paying attention. Ew, one of them says, immediately followed by the other saying, back the fuck off, creepo. You don't move. Oh, fuck this, gross old man. Why you gotta ruin everything? They both slowly back up and head into the station while you stay put. Good. That's exactly what you needed them to do. You really shouldn't be talking to them like that, the man says as the 2 young women head inside. Calling them lovely, I mean.
Why is that?
You ask. Well, nice of him to invite you in for a conversation. It gives you an excuse to get close enough to strike. The man shakes his head. You can't trust them anymore, he says. Younger women, I mean. Tell them that they look pretty, and rather than take the compliment, they'll go running for a cop or some white knight beta male. It's not worth it. Oh, you're going to enjoy this. You wipe your lips clean before climbing out of the dumpster. You'd been more aggressive than usual during this feeding, but your victim is still alive. It'll take him several minutes to get his wits about him again, and several more before he's able to claw himself free of the mounds of food scraps and coffee grinds you left him laying in. He'll probably even miss his bus. Shame. As you leave, you notice that the 2 women have stepped back outside again on the other side of the building, no doubt hoping that this time they'll be left alone. You leave them be. though you wish you could be there to see their reactions when your victim walks past them, slathered head to toe in garbage. Your appetite largely sated for the moment, you decide to move on, always aware that there's a hunger for more that you can never fully extinguish. I'm noticing some frame rate that seems a little bit slower than normal. I think we're doing pretty good, all things considered, though. I don't know why that is, but we can still read everything. The road outside Elysium is cordoned off with reams of yellow and black police tape. A small herd of mortals have crowded around at regular intervals, talking amongst themselves as they speculate about what might have happened late last night. A quick glance up the building's mirrored face confirms what you already knew. The windows of the Elysium floor have been blown out, and the pavement is littered with a liberal peppering of broken glass. Someone must have known about the hunt last night. No one would have dared such a brazen attack on the heart of Ottawa's kindred society unless they knew many of the heaviest hitters were off the table for the night. Fleck shifts in your pocket. You decide to bring him with you just in case you could sniff out anything useful that might be invisible to the naked eye. You spot Key at the front door giving orders to one of his officers as he ties his long, dark hair back in a ponytail. It's almost enough to make you gawk. You don't think you've ever seen the sheriff do such a thing, but you manage to keep from embarrassing yourself. For years you'd heard the rumors of unnatural scarring on Key's neck, evidence of what remains of his Nosferatu curse, but on closer examination you're disappointed to find a tightly wrapped black scarf hiding any offending marks that might have otherwise been on display.
Ah, Silas.
He greets you as you approach the front door. He lowers his voice and waves you inside where you won't be overheard by mortal ears.
We've evacuated every floor of the building and kept the crime scene clear of interference. I have a few questions for you before we head up, though. You probably won't be surprised at their direction.
He pauses and watches for a reaction. You try not to give him anything to work with.
So tell me, where were you last night while the rest of us were driving our uninvited guests out of the sewers?
Oh, man. Let's go ahead and be somewhat truthful with him. A half-truth, which some would say is the worst kind of lie, but I think it will help our purposes.
I was attacked by Ward's anarchs while I was feeding. If I didn't know any better, I'd start to think that you're doing something to attract their attention,
he says. He looks more disturbed than angry by your response.
Any other night and I'd be looking to getting you a protective detail, but you're going to have to take care of yourself for the time being. How did you fight them off?
You think quickly and do your best to look embarrassed.
He ran. I was lucky Ward wasn't there himself. From what I've heard, he's surprisingly light on his feet for someone so big.
He seems mollified by your excuse, but you have no way of knowing if he really believes you.
And what about Jordan? She didn't show either.
We have to give an alibi for Jordan. Hopefully she follows up with what we tell her.
I checked up on Jordan after I woke up. She was trapped in one of her visions last night. They can be pretty intense.
Key scowls.
Both of you need to realize that we're in a state of emergency here and I shouldn't need to coddle you like fledglings. Jordan's always been reluctant to fight, but her abilities would have been useful down there. They might have even saved the lives of some of my mercenaries.
Well, I'm sorry, you say, hoping it comes off as genuine.
It's been a difficult week.
Better for the sheriff to merely think you incompetent rather than a traitor who assaulted Elysium.
We don't believe Kashif made it,
he adds almost as an afterthought.
But he went out doing what he loved, fighting Tremere.
It sounds like the Tremere put up quite a fight.
Key's eyes narrow.
They wouldn't have put up as much of a fight had you shown up as you were commanded. If I didn't think Corliss would throw a fit, you'd be sanctioned.
He cuts himself off mid-sentence.
Never mind. It doesn't matter. You're here now and maybe you can do some good. Help us figure out what happened last night. I managed to smuggle Picard up there through a service entrance. He and Vivian joined my people on a sweep. And Luca should be here just about done checking the surveillance footage.
Vivian's here? You ask, surprised. It's been a while since you've seen the Primogen. She'd seemed largely recovered when you saw her at the council after her crucifixion, but you hadn't expected her to be here sifting through the remnants of a terrorist attack on Elysium.
Well, I was surprised as you are, he admits, but I shouldn't have been. She's always had an uncanny insight into everything going on in this city, even when she has no means or business to know about it. I couldn't exactly deny her. She's a Primogen and she has the right to attend Elysium as any other kindred.
Which one's Luca? Hold on. Luca? I can't remember which one's Luca. Oh yeah, Luca's our sister. Okay, gotcha. That and you didn't want her to cause a scene. Luca cuts in, emerging from a small, unmarked door behind the security desk. Nothing unusual on the recordings, she says, but there was evidence of remote tampering. Whoever it was covered their tracks well. With enough time, I might be able to track down an approximate location, but they'll have moved on by then.
Of course, Key grumbles, scratching the scarf at his neck absently. I'm going to head upstairs. If either of you find anything interesting, let me know.
I'll come upstairs with you. It seems like all of our bases are covered down here. And a little extra time looking around upstairs might uncover something they'd miss otherwise. Yeah, Luca says. The scene down here's dead anyway. Anything interesting that's happened went on upstairs. The only thing I could think of was the security feeds, and that was a huge waste of time. She claps you on the back awkwardly. Guess you should join us. He remains awkwardly silent during the ride up. He knows something that you and Luca don't. He's not sane. Has there been any signs of Alicia? Luca asks, breaking the quiet as the elevator hums, nearing your destination. Do we know if she was here when the attack happened?
Hard to know for sure, he replies.
He seems distracted, caught up in his own thoughts.
But it's likely. If she wasn't here, she would have been storming the building by now, demanding answers, because that's how she operates. This place was her baby. If anyone was going to take it down...
He trails off awkwardly mid-thought, absently drumming his fingers along the grip of his gun. The elevator chimes a polite musical tone as the doors crack open, revealing the charred remains of Elysium, chased by the stench of burnt flesh. You step out into the wreckage, momentarily distressed as the heel of your boot breaks through a layer of blackened crust, sinking into something that squelches loudly enough for you to hear it over the sound of the investigators coordinating as they pick through the crime scene. Charred bodies have been stacked to either side of the elevator like heaps of firewood. These people must have had to move them to get inside, you think, trying to wrap your mind around the scene. All these dead kine. It must have been a rush for the elevator, but they were caught in the blast before the doors opened. Such wasteful death, which is true. Perfectly good feeding stock. The three of you break up into individual expeditionary parties, browsing through the areas less affected by the attack. The back half of the floor escapes most of the direct concussive blast from the bombing, although it's been damaged by smoke and some exposed metals have been warped by the heat. Unfortunately for Elysium's guests, their distance from the explosion likely only prolonged their suffering. You step over the twisted body of a mortal whose skin has been scoured by burns. Though if you had to hazard a guess as to the nature of his death, you erred on the side of suffocation while fire rampaged from room to room, billowing toxic smoke. If only you'd been able to convince Ward not to come here, none of this would have happened. For the first few minutes, your efforts lead to nothing but disappointment, at least until you crawl beneath a fallen piece of sheetrock, bringing you face to face with a cowering young woman too afraid to look you in the eye. She tries to pull away, gritting her teeth as clothing shifts on her body with a wet, ripping sound. Her tight-fitting red top has been fused to her skin in uneven patches, held in place by weeping burn wounds. She holds her hands over her face as she's trying to hide from you, streaking her cheeks and smoke-stained blonde hair with bloody soot. Let's go ahead and take the pleasant approach to start.
It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you. Just tell me what happened and I'll make sure you get out of here safely.
Are you one of them? The woman whispers as you kneel down beside her. A single eye peeks out from behind her fingers, wild and darting this way and that as it takes in the entirety of her situation from within the safety of her upheld palms. Don't want to die.
No one's going to hurt you.
Try to soothe her. You won't get anything from her until she thinks she's safe.
Were you a prisoner here?
What? She stutters. Of course not. I've been coming to the club for weeks now. The owners didn't do this. It was... She goes quiet again and eyes you closely, sweeping a long, twisted strand of hair away from her face. Does she think you're one of the people who attacked? Coming to silence her?
I'm just a consultant the owners brought in to work in concert with the police. We just want to make sure everyone is safe.
You don't sound like one of them. You're working with the police?
Yes, ma'am. We're combing through the wreckage looking for survivors. You're lucky we found you.
It looks like she's starting to relax. It's hard for you to imagine what it must have been like for her, hiding in this collapsed room all day, terrified that she'll be found by a group of terrorists.
I'm gonna get you out of here and into medical care, okay?
You say, hoping to sound comforting.
What's your name?
She takes your hand and pulls herself unsteadily up to her feet. I'm... Michaela. Michaela, can we go now? She tries to pick at her dress strap where it fused to her shoulder and a shiver runs down her back when she's unable to remove it.
Of course, you say. I just need you to answer a quick question first.
You don't want to keep her too long. The woman clearly needs to get to a hospital as soon as possible, but you also can't give up the opportunity to ask a question of the only known survivor of the attack.
Close your eyes and try to focus on any sounds or voices you remember from the attack last night. Did they say anything that stands out?
As long as I don't have to remember what it looked like, I think I can do that. Michaela looks down at the floor and closes her eyes. You wait patiently for her to recall anything relevant to your investigation, but after almost 2 minutes of silence, your patience starts to run out.
Michaela, you ask, still with me?
Yes, she whispers. I remember what the man said when he first arrived. Ignore their herd. We're not here for the mortals. I think he was in charge.
Did you get a look at his face?
The recalled words alone betray the assault as a kindred attack, but She can give you anything else. She shakes her head. That's when I turned and ran. I hid for a while, but never saw who the man was. She shakes her head. That's the best I can do. I'm sorry. Her gaze snaps to a location behind you, where you duck through into the collapsed room. Ooh. Is that injured of note? Ah, yes, good old Vivian. And who do we have in here? A familiar voice calls from the other side of the fallen sheetrock. I hear voices. Vivian Mare pushes the debris out of the way with a strength that belies her lithe feminine frame. She steps forward, grimacing as she dusts her hands and sweeps an errant piece of crumbling of drywall from her bone-white suit's crisp lapel.
Vivian!
You exclaim. Her sudden appearance has caught you off guard.
I found a survivor. Her name's Michaela.
You pause and look down at the injured young woman.
We should probably get her to a hospital as soon as we can. She's been badly burned.
The poor thing. Vivian sweeps down toward the cowering woman in a graceful arc, a white dove lighting gently upon a molted field of red, latching on with tiny talons, a grip much too strong for a gossamer creature. We'll have you mended in no time, my dear, Vivian says. She cranes her neck down to look into Michaela's eyes. You've decided to come with me. You feel safe by my side. She stands abruptly with a sharp jerk, all sense of grace abandoned in an interest of expediency. Michaela rises with her in a similar fashion.
She hasn't seen much. I'm not sure you'll find her all that useful.
Vivian smiles icily. I'll be the judge of that child.
I'm just trying to save you some time.
Don't worry, Silas. I'll make sure your little pet is well looked after.
Pet?
Oh, excuse me. Pet? Michaela asks. What did you mean by that? Worry not, Vivian says, draping an arm around her shoulders while leading her way toward the elevator. There isn't much you can do aside from openly denying the will of a primogen, and given the volatility of the situation, you'd rather not volunteer yourself for the executioner's block. Silas! Oh, excuse me. Silas! Luca calls you from one of the discreet feeding rooms to the right of the main hall. Come here for a sec. You follow her voice and brush aside the charred and twisted strands of what used to be reflective metal beads obscuring the goings-on within the intimate nook. You seen what I'm seeing here? She steps back, revealing a body that missed the brunt of the blast. His chest is riddled with ragged puncture wounds. Either the killer got extremely carried away with a large knife, or this is the work of a vampire's claws. Now the question is, like, how are we going to go about this with our sister? No, actually, let's just go with what we know.
It looks like he was clawed to death. If I had to guess, I'd say it's one of Ward's gangrel anarchs. The Ferals aren't the only kindred who can grow claws, but I've never met anyone else able to do something like this with just their hands.
Luca nods in agreement.
And that's what I thought too. I just need to make sure I wasn't imagining it. I bet Ward thought the bomb would wipe out anything that could point blame at him. Maybe even make us think it was the Tremere, striking while we were distracted by the coterie in the sewers.
A vaguely familiar voice catches you off guard from just outside the nook.
Silas, I'd like to speak to you in private.
Damn, Adaline's arrived. You don't have much choice but to do as she says. Luca cocks her head to the side and you mouth the word Archon. She flinches slightly before catching herself and nodding, then turns back and busies herself examining the corpse. Adaline taps her foot impatiently as you sweep aside the melted beadwork and join her in the hall. The Archon is nearly swallowed up by a well-worn olive-green military jacket and a dark pork pie hat snug tightly on her head. If you didn't know any better, you'd think she was an eccentric mortal who had arrived in Elysium completely by accident. Those piercing eyes, though. There's no mistaking the power behind them.
And what can I do for you?
You ask. Come with me, she says, not waiting for a response before turning her back and leading you through Elysium's myriad social areas, eventually turning down a smaller hallway meant for the staff. She stops and sniffs the air, frowning in distaste. At least half of the hall has been reduced to stumps of charred wood and rubble slashed with coarse rebar scorched black in the blast.
This is where they set the primary charges, she says.
Even I couldn't smell the semtex, the conclusion is obvious. She rolls the melted husk of a desktop computer tower over with her foot. The motherboard and memory modules have been reduced to slag. Tell me, why is your sire not overseeing this investigation? The question is not what you expected, and it catches you by surprise.
Well, I have no idea. I came here as soon as I could after waking for the evening.
No opinions of your own? Adaline asks, lips pressed together in what could almost be described as a pout. I thought you were different from the rest of these lick spittles. Perhaps I was wrong.
With respect, Archon,
you say before thinking better of it.
I possess personal opinions. Without the data to back them up, they're uninformed and not worthy of mention.
How very stoic of you, Adaline says. She chuckles in spite of herself. Proper prince would be here overseeing the investigation of such an attack personally. In past nights, my masters and I would be inclined to allow local Camarilla to govern their cities as they see fit, but these are extraordinary times. We cannot suffer blatant masquerade violations in the era of the Second Inquisition. She straightens her unusual hat until it rests in perfect symmetry above her brow. Something must be done, but I have no interest in change for the sake of change. I need to know that the decisions I make will breed the desired effect. Where's she going with this, you wonder? And why is she telling me, of all people? You've had an interesting few weeks, Silas, she says after a lengthy silence, and your nightly activities have raised more than a few eyebrows. She turns her back on you and crouches down by the burnt-out desktop PC, fingers wiggling in its exposed wiring until they detached a small SSD drive hidden deep within the chassis. She turns it over in her hands before pocketing it with a self-satisfied smirk. There is very little hidden beneath the surface that I can't discover. You take a nervous step backward, eyes sweeping the room for escape points. It's an instinctual reaction to a casual threat leveled at you by a vampire of such immense power. If Adaline notices, she makes no comment on it. So let's cut through the bullshit. The aggressive shift in demeanor startles you, which was likely its intended effect. I don't care who you plot with or why. Your personal struggles are too far beneath my interests to be of any significance. What I do care about is putting a lid on these masquerade breaches before you idiots bring the mortal intelligence agencies down on your heads. They'll burn the capital to the ground, and I refuse to be destroyed in this place. Do you hear me? Her eyes blaze fire, and for a moment you feel as though you're being consumed in their flickering flames. So tell me what you've learned and make me believe you. Forcing information through compulsion is an ugly and imprecise business prone to failure. I'd rather secure your cooperation so we can get through this together without leaving you as a simpering sack of flesh and misfiring brain matter. Rattled nerves aside, the Archon is presenting you with a rare opportunity. Whatever you tell her could help direct her investigations, even take down a powerful player. Of course, if she doesn't believe you, things could get ugly very fast. I do have to think that there's something going on behind the scenes. So I think I'm going to go with this one.
I can't be sure who's behind it, but it seems like the Anarchs are being set up as convenient fall guys to take the blame for everything going wrong. All the evidence lines up too perfectly, and reality is never that simple.
It's not a terribly useful sentiment, but it's one I agree with, Adaline says as she weighs your words carefully. You catch a quick glimpse of Key watching your interview from several rooms worth of rubble down the hall. Don't concern yourself with the sheriff, the Archon says, pulling your attention back to her. In our world, the simplest answer is rarely the correct one. The Anarchs are an instrument being used against us, but it's wielder of that weapon who concerns me, not so much the weapon itself.
Taking the weapons away from an actor hiding in the shadows leaves them with nothing. They'll have to expose themselves if they can't do it by proxy.
An astute observation, Adaline says. I knew there was something more rattling around in that head of yours other than decaying meat. Don't misunderstand me. Ward and his followers will be dealt with. But crushing them prematurely is only eradicating the symptoms of a disease which will continue to fester beneath the surface. I know that these Anarchs have harassed you several times in recent nights, and I appreciate your desire to uncover the truth. But there's something I'm still missing, and I can't pull the trigger until the time is right. As far as you can tell, she seems sincere. The last time you spoke, she'd been far more critical regarding Ward's interest in you. What could have changed since then? Your willingness to discuss your opinions on the matter more candidly? Bear with me a moment, Adaline says. She picks her way to the back of the room and runs her hand along the length of the one wall still left standing. Picking a spot, she raps her knuckles against it and returns her greeting with a hollow echo. Satisfied, she turns back to you. What other information can you offer me? Surely you've delved deeper into the matters at hand. Judgment is coming soon, Silas, and the greater a help you are to me, the better things will turn out for you. If I suspect you're holding something back, there will be consequences. Oh man. Whew. Man, what do we tell her? And how much can we tell her? Thank you, Z. Yeah, I think the La Sombra would definitely be an interest. Let's go ahead and start with that. Fingers crossed.
Key and I were ambushed and almost destroyed by a La Sombra 2 nights ago. There are at least 2 of them in the city at the moment, and they could be capable of anything.
That perks the Archon up. I'd heard there was a disagreement between Key and one of the envoys from Chicago. I believe his name is Javier. He's with the Rabbi, Michaelis Basaras, on his leash, as it were. But I wasn't aware of lethal intent, nor was I informed of your involvement. How can you be sure that this magister intended to destroy the sheriff? I think this middle one is probably the best one. Don't you think? It's short on details. How about this one? He tried to suffocate us and conjured smog while laughing about how we'd fallen into his trap. Seemed indicative of intent. Indicative. What's the best one to go with, do you think, guys? Might be too glib.
He tried to suffocate us and conjured smog while laughing about how we'd fallen into his trap. Seems indicative of intent to me.
You paint a rather stereotypical depiction, Adaline says. But sometimes stereotypes are earned, and the Magisters have done more than their fair share to preserve their reputation over the centuries. As both you and the sheriff are still with us, would I be correct in assuming that Javier has met his final death? Or did he escape and slink off to hide? I'm trying to remember what happened with that. Because we got... I almost got killed by it. I remember that much. I don't think Key ripped out his neck. Do you guys remember that? I don't. For the life of me. Here, I actually may have to check that. I'm trying to remember what chapter he actually... Is it exhibition? Okay. Ah, okay. I'm on the right one. It was during the exhibition chapter. Okay. We're gonna double check this and make sure. Because I'm wanting to be honest with the. Okay. We went through the obfuscate. Okay. He had to put him down. That's what happened. So what should we go for? Like, Key didn't want to question him alone. We were knocked out. Let's just go ahead and go for this one. I think.
He won't be troubling us anymore. Key made sure of that.
How unsettlingly vague, the Archon says. Be clear. You mean your attacker was destroyed? You nod.
Yes.
Excellent. Of course, this information begs another question. Does Javier's master know of or endorse this behavior against the local Camarilla? I'll inquire with Michaelis Basaras in person. Have no fear. You won't be mentioned. Is there anything else you wish to tell the Archon? Ooh. Oh man, we could completely take down Alicia right now because of the VR application systems.
Do it.
Woo! I'm wondering how much of this we can actually tell. Yeah, that's still frowned upon.
I found something very peculiar. Alicia has an entire sweatshop of ghouls hooked up to Vitae drips and wired into some kind of VR application system.
You're going to have to explain that accusation better if you want me to care about what you claim to have seen, the Archon says. Who are these ghouls? What exactly is she doing with them? And how did you end up finding them anyway? She's going to want more information, but you have very little to go on. There hasn't been much time to investigate, especially after the exhibition hall was bombed the following night. You doubt Key has forgotten about the incident, but he's been engaged constantly since then. Oh man, we'd have to narc out Key to do this, though. I think she could basically tell a lie very quickly. Yeah, that's true. Investigating stuff is part of his deal. Tell the truth about it. It's probably going to get Key killed, and that's going to be a shame, but...
I was recruited by Key to help him investigate Alicia. The ghouls seem to be largely incapacitated and hooked into a larger apparatus.
So you're telling me that the sheriff recruited you to investigate a primogen, invaded her domain, and that while you were there you discovered some kind of ghoul-based online sweatshop?
It does sound somewhat outrageous now that you say it back to me.
It does.
But it's the truth.
Adaline ponders for a moment. I'll admit that I'm intrigued. I've never seen such systems personally, though I've heard chatter about the idea. It also sounds like a risky proposition in nights swarming with mortal authorities who would rather burn the capital to the ground than suffer us to remain here. I may have to examine this basement room personally. Is there anything else you wish to tell the Archon? Oh man, we could like completely plunge this city into chaos. I think we need to go ahead and maybe throw Corliss under the bus. I don't think that she'd care so much about Robert the warehouse. Alicia Gray owns it, hiding through shell companies. It's where we first found the Anarchs in the city. I don't know if that would help out all that much. Corliss working closely with a Tremere named Trevor Haight, and she had me pass a message to Kashif from Prince Annabelle of Quebec City. I know these ones. I'm definitely telling them. I'm telling about Ward trying to recruit us and the, yeah, that's true. What's conjecture and what can we prove? Ooh, what an interesting turn of events here. I don't think she'd care so much. But what about Corliss working with the Tremere? Let's go ahead and go with this. Let's try it. I'm not sure how much time, how many opportunities we're gonna have here.
Corliss is working closely with a Tremere named Trevor Haight. She had me pass a message to Kashif from Prince Annabelle of Quebec City.
Archon's pet. The Archon nods. I've seen Eden in conference with Mr. Haight twice since arriving in Ottawa. Well-mannered fellow, excellent dresser. But if I don't miss my guess, his charm is a Trojan horse. Under normal circumstances, using you as an intermediary would have been the smart choice, but could be read as too cowardly for a seneschal with her eyes on ascension. She's playing it safe, but it opens her up for attack. What message did you bring to the unfortunate Mr. Salik?
I was asked to extend an offer to the Banu Hakim newcomers as a whole. A sanctuary in London, Ontario, where the clan can build a new home, free of Tremere influence. Corliss wanted me to announce her support for the deal.
Adaline chuckles, trying unsuccessfully to hide her reaction behind the back of her hand. London was once a domain of the Sabbat before it was taken by Anarchs. It was later abandoned by its baron. Rumors suggest a werewolf infestation of the surrounding farmland, but no one knows for sure. What was the Vizier's reaction?
He was furious, you say. Even Ophelia felt that it was an insult.
Ah, the seer, Adaline says. Don't underestimate Ophelia, Silas. I've learned the hard way on more than one occasion to be wary of the children of Malkav. If the rest of you are playing a political game, you should always remember that Ophelia is at least 2 steps ahead of you. History's greatest geniuses were all madmen. They'd have you believe that their insight is a product of mysterious omens, when, in reality, they're simply connecting pieces of a puzzle that no one else sees. This time, she doesn't bother hiding her grin. So tell me, what do you think of the offer? Is the Prince of Quebec City acting in good faith, or does Annabelle's gesture leave a bad taste in your mouth?
It was a thinly veiled insult if I've ever seen one. I don't believe for a second that it was pro-offered in good faith.
You may be right, the Archon says. In my experience, Annabella rarely acts in good faith with her fellow Camarilla, much less her much hated enemies of the Assassins. He stops to think for a moment. I think it's high time I look into the background of Mr. Hate. He's getting altogether too comfortable whispering in Eden's ear for his own good.
Last night, Robert Ward tried to recruit Jordan and me. He wanted us to join him in an attack against Elysium. When we declined, he attacked us and left us for dead in an old garage on the outskirts of town.
For the first time in the conversation, Adaline seems genuinely caught off guard. Her eyes narrow and she opens her mouth, but no words come out. She closes her jaw with a sharp click of teeth and considers her next words carefully before speaking. Have you told anyone about this? You shake your head. It's a dangerous truth. Hopefully telling the Archon will be a point in your favor rather than an immediate death sentence. Good, Adaline says. So now I have a confirmation that the Anarchs were involved in this attack. Not that there was much room for doubt. You believe Ward is still interested in you? That he might try once more to bring you over to his side? He's been remarkably persistent so far. He may try again. Oh, hey, Blood. Go ahead and back this up real quick. All right.
The fact that he didn't destroy me when he had the chance suggests that he isn't done with me yet. I think he'll be back.
Excellent, the Archon says. The man certainly has a soft spot for you. The question is, how can I use that to my advantage? You shift uncomfortably as Adaline scrutinizes you like a tool she's deciding how to use most efficiently. Speak to no one about your involvement, she says after a lengthy quiet. I assure you that most local kindred won't be as forgiving of your dalliances as I am. Go about your business as normal, and if you were contacted by Ward, Semvik, or any of the others, even the Feral, text me at this number. She hands you a crisp white business card. I don't think I need to tell you what happens if I find out you've been in contact and neglected to follow these instructions, do I? You shake your head and take the card, slipping it into your coat pocket. What else can you do? You'll need to be more careful from here on out. With luck, I'll be out of this frozen hellhole by the end of the week. Adaline grins. It's all teeth. Is there anything else you wish to tell the Archon? Okay, here comes the big one. We're gonna see what happens. We may be pushing our luck here, but
I've recently recovered a memory from when I was a fledgling. It implicated Corliss in draining an elder completely dry.
Recovered a memory, the Archon says. You can tell that she's skeptical before you've even begun. Assuming for the moment that you're telling me what you truly believe is the case, how do you know you can trust a mind that's already been tampered with? What you found could be a false memory implanted just as easily as a real one suppressed. You pause for a moment. She could be right, but it seemed so real. Woo! It was too detailed to be fake, too real. Aren't most implanted memories? Yeah, that top answer definitely seems legit. I agree. Got to give a good argument to her.
It was too detailed to be faked. Too real. Aren't most implanted memories vague? They rarely stand up to scrutiny. It must be why I could never remember the exact particulars of the nights following my embrace.
When a memory is suppressed and another one laid over top to close the gap, the resulting memories do tend to be vague, Adaline says, unless it's crafted by a master with centuries of study. Even elders can struggle through it with thoroughly convincing imprints that withstand intense scrutiny. I'll hear you out. Just don't take too long. There are more important matters to discuss.
I was on the floor of a high-rise building watching two kindred arguing. There was a body beside me. I believe it might have been my first kill. At least I wasn't sure who it was that I was watching, but when I looked closer, I was sure that one of them was Corliss. Judging by what they were wearing, it could have been the 1960s, maybe early 70s.
And the person she was arguing with? Adaline says. Did you get a name? What were they debating?
Well, I have no idea what they were saying. I think I'd been in shock at the time, and the exact words didn't register until things came into focus a few minutes later. But the other kindred? Grace. I think her name was Grace.
The Archon's eyes widen.
Do you have any idea who that was?
You ask. I believe I do. Go on, child. Continue your story. So I'm going to go ahead and tell the truth. If Corliss is, I don't know. We're just going to tell the truth. We're just doing this. We're probably going to get so just like slaughtered at the end of this. It's okay though.
Corliss pulled a gun and shot Grace twice. Corliss thought she was destroyed after shooting her and stepped over the body, but Grace was only waiting for her to make a mistake. She stabbed Corliss and they struggled for several minutes while I was trying to crawl away. By the time I looked back, Corliss had Grace subdued and was drinking from her neck. She didn't stop until Grace's body was dry.
Adaline goes still. You're certain of this? You nod.
It was visceral. Clear as if it happened yesterday. Arundel found her right after she'd finished.
The prince found her like that. The Archon mumbles something, thinking aloud. No. If this was the 60s, he wouldn't have even been in Ottawa yet. Toronto. How could you have known? Go on. Tell me the rest. I'm trying to remember. Arundel was furious because we had never seen him like raise his voice.
Arundel was furious, like he couldn't believe what she had just done.
As well he should have been, Adaline says. She flips open a notebook and jots something down quickly. It's not English, nor is it any language you've ever encountered before. Code of some kind? I can see why they wiped this from your memory, she says, shoving the pad back into her pocket roughly. But what I can't understand is why Arundel included a trigger to bring it back.
A trigger?
You ask, not sure if you heard right.
Jordan's mental probe brought this back.
Adaline shakes her head. No, it was only a trigger. If Arundel wanted this hidden, he would have either have destroyed you or rewritten your mind until the memory was a soup of unintelligible gibberish. He wanted you to remember this, but only under certain conditions.
Like if he were to go missing. Are you saying I'm some kind of dead man switch that was activated on his destruction?
Insurance in case Corliss double-crossed him, Adaline says. It sounds like something he'd do, but I still doubt that Eden would dare to outright destroy the prince. If she's actually responsible, he must be hidden away somewhere so she can use him as a bargaining chip, or as a bludgeon.
Who was Grace, anyway? I know diablerie is taken seriously by the Camarilla, but we all know it happens. If Arundel thought it would bring Corliss down, Grace must have been an important kindred.
Discover the truth about your past. Ooh. She was what I'd call a kingmaker, Adaline says. Relatively unknown outside elite kindred circles and never the outward face of power. But she knew secrets. Powerful secrets. The shadow of Grace Ep.8 has kept certain kindred in power for over half a century. She had allies in high places, especially here in Canada. Were I to hazard a guess, I'd wager that Grace knew something about Eden that kept her under tight control. An argument ensued, and Eden was monumentally lucky. This information will be incredibly useful to me.
So if it came out that Corliss drained Grace,
Eden would have to flee the continent, and even then she might not be safe, Adaline says.
But I thought you were only here to investigate the Masquerade breaches. Why go after Corliss?
The Archon's patience seems to be wearing thin. Do I owe you an explanation for my every action? Consider yourself lucky that I have no interest in keeping Eden in power. Tell this story to the wrong lick and you disappear in an instant, never to be found. So keep your mouth shut, and don't mention these memories to anyone. Am I understood? You have little choice but to comply. Picking a fight with an Archon is a fight you won't win. The Vivian acting suspiciously isn't going to do anything. So how diablerie works, Blood, in the World of Darkness, I don't know. I think this has not changed in 5th edition. But everyone is connected to Cain, the first vampire. He was the first generation. Then 2nd generation, the antediluvians who formed the original clans. 3rd generation, 4th generation, and so on, going all the way to like 13th, 14th, 15th. If you drain the blood of a vampire who is closer to Cain than you are, you have a chance of absorbing their power and strengthening your blood. For example, if I was a 13th gen kindred and I diablerized, say, a 9th generation, my blood would go up and become more powerful. Mostly like 12. I'd go up a generation. So diablerie is a way to get your blood to be more potent. What more potent blood means when your generation goes higher is, like in the RPG, most characters, you have 5 dots and stuff. But once you pass like 8th generation, you start gaining additional dots. So you can get up to 6 dots in something, 7 dots, 8 dots, 9 dots, going up to 10. And 10 is almost godlike in its strength level. So you can do that. The only problem is you also have a chance, you also basically destroy their soul. And in a worst case scenario, some of their soul can actually leak into you. So yeah, Cain's blood gets more distilled. The thing about that though is it's kind of going the opposite way. And there are now thin bloods who have like, still formidable vampiric abilities, but they can actually go out in the sun without a whole lot of issue. So they have some advantages over the ancient vampires, and some of the ancient vampires aren't too keen about that at all. So it's like a different flavor of powerful. Okay. Should we go ahead and let her know about the shell companies? I don't think it would hurt anything. But the Vivian thing is just complete conjecture. But I don't know if tell him about Alicia owning the warehouse that Robert Ward blew up. Whoa, wait a minute. Yeah, it could.
One more thing. I had my ghoul look for info on the warehouse Robert Ward blew up a few weeks ago. It turns out Alicia Gray owns it, hiding through shell companies. It's where we first found the Anarchs in the city.
The Archon sucks in a sharp breath. One of the few mortal reactions you've seen from her. Your discovery definitely caught her off guard. You're certain of this? She asked before getting hold of herself. That information hasn't shown up in my inquiries just yet. Were you able to uncover any additional details?
Gerard claims that the property was bought by a holding company based in Toronto called Blackstrom.
On the surface, it seems unlikely that Alicia would deal with Ward and his cohorts, Adaline says. But she's been at the epicenter of both bombings, and now we know that she owned the building where Ward was first found. One link would be a coincidence. Two are possible, but unlikely. Three, I believe I'll need to have a word with Miss Gray, assuming she wasn't eliminated in the blast.
And I can't think of anything else.
You can occasionally learn discipline dots. There's different systems to go about it. I've seen different systems. I always think what I've always kind of done is you can gain 1 dot in one of their in-clan abilities, and maybe the ability to learn the rest. Like, for example, if a Nosferatu, this is how I would do it personally. If a Nosferatu diablerized a Gangrel, let's say, you could, I would basically roll for it. You could gain a dot or 2 in their disciplines, or you were able to buy the Gangrel disciplines as in-clan disciplines, because normally learning disciplines that aren't part of your native clan are a lot harder and a lot more expensive. It would just make it cheaper to buy, so.
I can't think of anything else.
Then consider yourself dismissed. She waves you away with an offhand gesture. When you're finally clear of the dilapidated office room, you heave a very mortal-like sigh of relief. It's not every vampire that could fend off an Archon's mental probing. Oh lord, we're so gonna die. You continue searching through the remains of Elysium for over an hour, but other than a few charred corpses hidden beneath collapsed walls, you find nothing of note. Lex skitters through the wreckage, though you've had a hard time knowing whether he's looking for survivors or scraps of food. Every time you see him, his coarse gray fur is grimier than the last time. Caitiff, yes, the clanless. I actually find them to be, arguably the most powerful. Eventually, you realize that most of the other investigators have left. Not sure what else to do for the moment, you follow them down the elevator and merge into the lobby just in time to watch Luca getting into the back of a cab along with a man in a dark blue coat. You think he was one of Key's ghouls, but at this distance, through the reflective glass, it's impossible to tell for sure. For the first time in several nights, you find yourself with nothing in particular to do. You know you should feel some kind of relief, but instead, you have a pit in your stomach. The lobby is deadly quiet, and for a moment you tense up in anticipation of an attack that never comes. You push open the glass doors and walk out onto the sidewalk. Even the mortal gawkers have gone home. You're all alone. Oh, no, the thing about it is, Blood, is, they learn... so for in-clan disciplines, back in 3rd edition, you would learn disciplines at current rating times 5. So if you had a 2 in Fortitude, for example, as a Ventru, it would be 2 times 5, 10, to get the next dot, and so on and so forth. For out-of-clan disciplines, it was current rating times 7. For Caitiff, all disciplines are current rating times 6. So it's tougher for them to learn the disciplines right off the bat because, they don't have any in-clan disciplines, but they can learn all the disciplines actually cheaper in... Does that make sense? So there is an advantage to it, which is pretty cool. We're growing hungry. We're gonna go ahead and feed again.
Not being able to see hidden enemies doesn't mean they aren't there. I should feed now, while I still can before heading home.
Okay, let's return to the tunnel beneath the sapper staircase, because we ran into that cop before. Oh. Alright, I need you guys' help on this. Where should we go? Should we return? We're not going back to the Greyhound station, because we just went there tonight. I'm not going to go ahead and visit Sam for a blood top off, because I think that I think going back there would be a bit of a problem. Should we go back to the park? I don't want to visit Alicia's blood dolls. I see nothing good going down that road. Though, I mean, it could be an easy way to feed right off the bat. What do y'all think? I think this is our last, like, kind of mellowness before things start really getting out of hand. Hey, roaches, welcome. Yeah, it has been a while. The park was the first place we went. Let's go with that. You return to Confederation Park, strolling by a monument you'd passed dozens of times but never truly looked at. You can't say for certain why it catches your eye tonight. Maybe the light of the moon hitting the upturned wings of a majestic eagle crowning the memorial, but you stop on the sidewalk and take a moment to admire the work its artisans put into it. 4 native soldiers are flanked on both sides by a ferocious bear and a wolf, maws open, teeth displayed. A plaque below dedicates it to the Aboriginal war veterans of Canada. Something shifts behind the stone base, flickering just out of the corner of your eye. Maybe it hadn't been the statue itself that had drawn your attention after all. Someone is watching you, and they're doing a very poor job of trying to be sneaky about it. I slowly stroll past the statue with my back turned. No vampires get along with werewolves. Occasionally, only occasionally, do gangrel and werewolves kind of... It's like a wolf and a bear kind of situation, you know? If they meet each other, they're gonna fight. But like I said, even that like relationship is incredibly rare. I'll slowly stroll past the statue with my back turned and then catch the spy in the act if they come after me. You walk past the monument, trying to act casual while you're watching for any movement in your peripheral vision. Your low-effort stalker pops out to follow just as you expected, and when you whirl around, he stops in place, stock still as if he thinks you can't see him when no longer moving.
Why are you watching me?
You ask, trying to walk the fine tightrope between threatening and approachable. The man reeks of booze, and from the look of him, he's been a while without a change of clothes.
I saw you the other night in here, looking around all creepy like. Now you're back here again. You realize you're the one who's creeping around right now, right?
Well, I mean, I guess you have a point, the man says. I've just had a run of tough luck lately is all, and I was wondering...
Is it money you want?
You ask, rolling your eyes. You can't take him for a meal here on the main street, but if a few coins can make him go away, you fish through your pocket and come up with a few toonies. The $2 coins glitter in the streetlight as you gently toss them in his direction. The man snaps them up with surprising ease and pockets them.
Go get yourself some food and clean up,
you say.
Right.
The man says, eyeing you as he turns around and heads down the street in the other direction. Once you're sure he's gone, you bring your attention back to the park. What werewolf blood does to... See, every creature in the world of darkness, their blood can affect vampires in different ways. For example, werewolf blood, it makes frenzy rolls much more difficult. So a Bruja drinking werewolf blood is definitely not advisable. And it also gives you the equivalent of celerity 1. It increases your celerity rating by 1, I think. Something similar to that. Because of the speed that werewolves have. When it comes to For example, Fae, changelings. There are some Malkavians that actively hunt changelings because changeling blood gives a vampire the exact same effect as a hallucinogen. So, cool stuff there. Ooh. So where should we go, guys? Should we, older gentleman sitting to the northwest, indulge in a little nostalgia? I am not going to loiter in the light. I think we already did that. And then there's the skeleton crew working a construction site. I'm leaning toward the construction site, to tell you the truth. Knowing my luck, indulging in nostalgia will run right into a mage or something of that effect. Or a Van Helsing. Let's go to that skeleton crew. You wait around in the shadowy periphery of the construction site. If you've learned anything about Ottawa in the decades that you've stayed here, it's that you can always count on city construction crews to take more breaks than any reasonable mortal would find necessary. And just as if they were waiting for you, they split up into clusters, most opening sandwich bags or grabbing a smoke break. One of them is puffing on a particularly pungent cigar which seems to put off his fellow workers, so he stalks off into the park to enjoy it alone. Ooh, you do so love it when your victims self-elect.
What the hell?
He grunts as you grab him from behind and attempt to wrestle him into the bushes. It takes more effort than you expected to subdue the man. He may have the body of a laborer, but he's been up working all night. In the end, he's no match for your undead strength. You sink your fangs into his neck, being careful to only delicately puncture and not rip the skin as his struggles lessen, and eventually he relaxes in your grip. He's certain to be found within the next 15 minutes or so when the break ends, and you don't want stories coming out about mutilated construction workers on the morning newscasts. There. You finish up and lick the small puncture wounds clean and then prop him onto the nearest bench. If you're lucky, his buddies will just think their co-worker's pungent cigar packed more of a punch than he expected and made him feel ill. Delirious. Either way, you'll be long gone by the time they find him. Your appetite largely sated for the moment, you decide to move on, always aware that there's a hunger for more that you can never fully extinguish. I love that. The lights inside your haven are already blazing brightly as you close the front door and take off your coat. From the office within, you hear Gerard's old-fashioned ink pen scratching away at some important missive or another as he burns the proverbial midnight oil. "I'll be there presently, sir," he says. "Apologies." The writing stops immediately and the ghoul rushes to you and takes your coat, somehow managing to make a trot look dignified. "Was the evening productive?" he asks carefully. "The usual channels have been surprisingly quiet. What little chatter there was about Elysium on the internet seemed to be just as in the dark as we are."
We got hit pretty bad, but I think we'll be okay. We just need to focus on controlling the narrative.
Gerard nods thoughtfully. "I did catch a broadcast on the radio about it. They're calling it a fire that got out of control. I imagine that's the preferred story. Keeps things simple." He steps into the closet and hangs your coat carefully beside the rest of your outdoor wardrobe as you walk into the living room and sink down into a plush chair. Just one moment, you think. Just one moment of peace. You close your eyes and let your mind drift as the world settles around you. You're not sure when you dozed off or for how long, but you're suddenly jolted awake when Gerard apologetically suggests that you head to your bed before sunrise. After a moment's hesitation, the chair truly is quite comfortable. You get up and walk to your bedroom, excusing Gerard for the day before collapsing into your luxurious bed with a sigh. Every time you close your eyes, you can see the raid in your mind. How many times have you brushed with final death in recent nights? Far too many for your liking. But you have to admit that it strengthened you from the complacent, pampered creature who you were mere weeks ago. So much has changed. How can you ever trust anyone in kindred society again after what you've discovered about Corliss? Maybe the mistake was in trusting anyone in the first place. As sleep slowly lays claim over you, a dream you'd nearly forgotten from several nights ago resurfaces. Arundel walking side by side with Robert Ward, speaking as comrades with similar visions for the world. A widening schism ran between them as Ward grew impatient with the glacial pace of change within the Camarilla, and now that Arundel is missing, you can only imagine that the Anarch has seen his way forward validated. Could that be the true reason behind the raid on Elysium? An attack on the Ivory Tower's very institutions? The building blocks of civilized kindred society? Civilized? Whoever leads the city going forward will have their work cut out for them. Corliss is a very different animal than Arundel for what it's worth, and she values tradition. Conscious thoughts turn to muddled memory which slowly fades into the comfort of sleep, safe in your haven away from the scorching heat of the sun. Surprisingly, given the nature of the last several nights, your sleep is deep and rejuvenating. The sleep of the dead. Ooh, all right. So that was the end of chapter 8, guys, and definitely the meat and potatoes of that was our conversation with the Archon. We told Adaline a lot, and the question is going to be, what are the effects of that going to, you know what I mean? What are going to be the consequences of that? But Adaline's very much given us the impression that she can see through lies. And I was just like, hey, here's all of our stuff that we know. Maybe she can go ahead and fix it for us. Who knows? But I think the power balance here in this city is going to have another very titanic shift. And the only question is, how is Silas going to fit into that shift? Guess we'll have to figure it out. But we will go ahead and go with chapter 9 in the next stream, guys. I hope you all have enjoyed it. If you haven't followed the Twitch channel, please do so. I try and stream on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays with random times in between. And if you're watching the replay of this on YouTube, thank you guys very much for watching. I have a link to the Twitch channel down in the description below, as well as a link to Vampire the Masquerade Parliament of Blood. I highly recommend getting this game, because I know I have just scratched the surface of all the potential storylines involved. Jeffrey Dean did an amazing job with this, in my opinion. And also a link to my Extra Life page where I'm raising money for my local children's hospital via the awesome Extra Life charity. So check out all of those links if you feel so inclined. Like, share, subscribe, you guys know the drill there. And we will see you next time. Later days, everyone.